Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have made a matching set. So I've got a sweater and some joggers to match in this very jazzy lightning fabric. So this video is just going to be about the patterns I use, the fabric I use, and then what I thought and how it all worked out. So I'm pretty pleased with them. So I had an idea to make some joggers like back in October because that's basically what I was living in, and it was autumn time moving into winter time. It made sense in terms of like wanting something nice and warm and cozy. And my idea initially was to make some colour block joggers where I do in sort of diagonal strips across the legs, different colours. I bought a couple of jogger patterns, and then I had a look online and saw how much fabric I would need to do it in that colour blocking, and it worked out as just being like too much money for me at the time. We had a holiday, we had car stuff, we had Christmas. I didn't really have the money then, so I kind of shelved that for a bit and I kind of changed tack and I made some other stuff instead. But I've come back around to joggers again because even though we are in May now, it's actually the 1st of May, I'm still wearing them all the time. So I found this fabric from Pound Fabrics. It was not a pound, that's a bit of a lie. It was about £8.95 or something a metre, and I got 2 metres. It's like this great blue and a bit purpley with like lightning bolts going across it. It is cotton French terry, and it feels quite nice and soft, and it's like a good thickness. I like French terry, it's just easy to sew with, and I don't know, there's just something pleasing about it. I don't know why. But this is a very fun pattern as well. So the joggers are a Viki Sews Joanne jogger. So that's a new pattern, I hadn't used that one before. I bought a couple of her patterns and then I picked that one to do as my first go. I got them from Etsy, I think, and they weren't very expensive. And then the sweater is the Waves and Wild Dolman Driftwood sweater for adults. With just the, so there's a few different hem versions, a few different sleeve versions. I've just got the straight hem and then the regular like sleeves, not the bishop sleeve, that is bigger. So I started off by cutting out the pattern for the joggers because initially I was just going to make the joggers, and I got 2 metres thinking that would be enough for the joggers. And there wouldn't be very much left over, maybe a little bit to make my son something. I cut out all the pieces, so there is the waistband, the front and back, there's the pocket bags for the inseam pocket, and then there's the pockets for the like patch pockets, so it's like really difficult to show. And they're quite big because they're quite long. I cut out a size 40 in the longer length. There's a few different height options when you get the pattern, so I went for the one that's probably, well, they came out as being far too long for me, so I went for the one that was like slightly above my height. My height was like awkwardly sort of on the edge of 2, and I went for the bigger one thinking that made more sense, but I am going to have to, when I make them next time, reduce the length by quite a bit. But yeah, they took up like most of the fabric, and that was what I intended, so I wasn't being very careful with it. But then when I looked at how much was left over, I did wonder if I had enough to make a simple sweater to match it, because the dream is obviously to have a matching set. So I spent a very long time placing the pattern pieces on my remaining fabric, and I mean a very long time, like an hour of just moving the pieces around and then getting really confused, until I decided that I did have enough fabric. So this is the sweater, and it has the front and the back, the neckline. I managed to do the neck in one piece, but it has the waistband, which I had to cut in half and cut out 2 pieces instead of 1 because it's just so long. I just didn't have a piece long enough. It's got the 2 cuffs for the sleeves, and then it also has the sleeves themselves. And so one of the sleeves has an extra seam because I didn't have enough fabric or a big enough piece of fabric to do it in one. So as well as having a seam that runs underneath, it also has one on the top as well. Just one of the sleeves. I do wonder in hindsight whether I should have cut the other one in half as well, just so that they matched, and then it would have looked more intentional. But because the pattern is quite busy, I don't think the seam is that noticeable, as noticeable as it would be if it was a repeating pattern. So you won't be able to tell, but that's where the seam falls on the sleeve, like the extra seam. So I did manage to actually get all the pieces for the sweater out of what was left. So because the sweater was one that I'd made before, because I did make myself a Halloween sweater using some spiderweb fabric, I decided to go for the sweater first, even though I had cut the joggers out first. I just thought it would like warm me up, you know. It's fairly simple construction. Like I said, I went for the normal raglan sleeve, not the bishop sleeve, which is which is bigger and poofier, so it requires more fabric and I wouldn't have had enough. I did the straight hem along the bottom. There is an option for a curved hem, which I should try out. And then it just sews together really simply. The front and back bodice go together at the shoulder seams, then you add the sleeves on, then you sew down the sleeve and the side, and then you add on the waistband, the neckband and the cuffs. I always find that patterns tell you to put the neckband on first, but I always put the waistband on first because it's the same construction, but I just think it's easier because it's bigger. So it's like a practice go. But the pattern's fairly straightforward, and the fabric is just really easy to sew with. I even top stitched around the neckline, which does make it look a bit better on the outside and keeps everything nice and, you know, keeps it all nice and flat, keeps the seam allowance down. So I'm very impressed with that. I made a size medium again. I did toy with the idea of doing a small because when I made the medium for Halloween, I thought it seemed a bit big for me. But I was worried if I cut out a small, it would be too small, but it would have made it easier to fit the pieces onto the fabric. So I was like toying with the idea of just small. I went for a medium and it's fine. I think next time I might try small because I think it is a little too big, but it's hard to say. It's hard to know for sure. Yeah, so that's the sweater, and then I moved on to the joggers. I'm very pleased with these. They are marked as a beginner pattern, which I think is, to me, a beginner pattern would be something that you could do like almost your first sewing project would be a beginner pattern. And I would say that like something like the Waves and Wild sweater is much more fits that bill, and their instructions are really clear as well. I think these joggers are doable. I mean, I managed it. But I wouldn't say that they're necessarily a beginner pattern because you do have to do like buttonholes and like for where the stuff comes out. Is this called twill tape? I bought it and I don't know what it's called. Where the twill tape comes out. And what drives me nuts with these patterns, because I don't have an overlocker or a serger, I get really annoyed when they tell you to use an overlocker or a serger. Obviously if I did have one I probably wouldn't be quite as annoyed, but they're expensive and they take up a lot of space. I doubt that many beginner sewers have an overlocker, and yet all the instructions are to overlock everything. That's kind of annoying. You know, I'm kind of used to it now, but I just think if it's a beginner pattern, to assume that the people that are doing a beginner pattern have an overlocker seems a little bit unrealistic. I don't know. So yeah, this was a new pattern for me, and so it has an elasticated waist that is also like sewn through, which gives it this like sort of texture effect, but I guess also holds the elastic in place. The elastic is in a channel in the waistband, which I much prefer to the other method that I've used recently for the itch to stitch Balboa skirt, where you sew the elastic onto the fabric directly, and that I just think is a bit messier and more awkward. It has the twill tape stringies that come out of buttonholes in the waistband. It has pockets on each side that are in seam with a pocket bag. Ta-da! Here's the pocket bag. And then it also has patch pockets on each leg as well, which kind of go across the side seams, so that's kind of interesting. I'm holding it really awkwardly, so it's really hard to see, obviously. Would have been easier if I think my phone, they're really big pockets, so my phone actually gets lost in it. I could put a book in it. There, that's the patch pocket. The book sticking out of my patch pocket. Yeah, that was really awkward. Yeah, and then they also have elasticated cuffs on the ankle, so there's elastic in there as well. I realised when I was putting it all together, because you actually start with the pockets, which was a little bit interesting, like a little bit, not like, it seems to go back and forth a little bit between the two different pockets, but I kind of get, it took me a while to realise that you have to sew the side seam together before you can put the patch pocket on, but it does direct you to prepare the patch pocket at the beginning, and also then you're doing the pocket bag for the other pockets as well. This is when I realised that I hadn't actually cut them out of the fabric. So I had already though used the fabric that I did have left over for my sweater. So I was kind of glad that I didn't cut them out, otherwise I might not have had enough for the sweater, but it did mean I had to use a different colour. And the only one I had to hand was this grey jersey, which is actually very soft, so it'll be very nice on my hands when I'm putting them in my pockets. But I don't love the grey, and it is a bit visible, like, in the pocket. I guess maybe if I was a little bit neater, or I gave them a really good iron, it would be a bit more hidden, but I think it's always just going to be a bit visible. So that was my bad, that was a mistake that I made. It's kind of a shame, but I don't know. I got this twill tape as well from Etsy, and I did not know what width of twill tape to get because it didn't tell me in the pattern anywhere that I could see. It tells you roughly the length, but even that is going to be different for each person because it depends how big your waist is, so the length even measurement is not super precise. But the size I ended up getting, I guessed, and it's too big, so it's like folded over inside. It's fine, it's not a problem, but it's just like an annoyance with the pattern that it didn't specify the size or the width of the twill tape. Also, it didn't specify the size of the elastic for the waist or the cuffs. So in the instructions, it says that the pattern pieces will tell you the size of the elastic to use, and I could not see it anywhere on the pattern, so unless I just missed it. But I looked for a long time, like that was another waste of probably about an hour, me trying to figure out what size elastic to use for my waist. So in the end, I just wrapped it around my waist and used that measurement, and did the same thing for the ankles as well. I was thinking I was more worried about getting the ankles too small, I don't know why. But it worked out as being fine, and the random, or the estimated waistband size worked out fine, and they're comfortable to put on and off, and they don't fall down, and the waistband looks kind of normal. So I wish I'd written down now what size I used. I cut out the size 40, I don't know if I mentioned that, and I also, yeah, I said I did a size 40, they're definitely a size too big, I think. And I did, I can't remember what it was, like 170 to 176 centimetres I think is the height, and that's way too long. I ended up cutting off about 4 centimetres from the bottom, which is not really the place where you're supposed to cut off length. It should be somewhere in the middle, like when you're working out the pattern prior to actually cutting out the fabric, obviously. But I didn't realise until until too long, and they're too late, and they're still too long. They're still quite a bit too long for me. So it's fine when I'm wearing them because the elastic in the ankles holds them onto my ankles, but when I'm putting them on, it's a bit of a weird tug to get them on because they're so long. So yeah, next time I will make them significantly shorter and possibly a size smaller. I mean, like I said, they do fit. They're just a little bit loose and voluminous. So I'm really pleased with how the joggers turned out, actually. They're definitely wearable. I've definitely been wearing them. They're comfortable, they fit. They are too big for me, but they still fit, so next time I'll just make them a bit smaller. I really like how it looks with the twill tape, and then I like having the combination of different pockets. I like having the matching set. that I could potentially wear. I haven't actually worn it together yet out of the house. And I'm really pleased with this because it was just something different and a little bit challenging, which is why I am a bit frustrated with the pattern, because I don't think this is a beginner pattern. It heavily relies, the instructions heavily rely on you using an overlocker. You have to use a buttonhole foot as well, and I have lost my buttonhole foot, so that was another waste of time waiting for a replacement one to arrive, which then didn't work. So then I ended up just doing zigzag stitches around the buttonhole shape, and then that worked, and so that's what I've ended up doing, so that's an option. And the pattern doesn't tell you the width of the twill tape and the size of the elastic for your waist or your cuffs. That I think is just an oversight in the pattern. The pattern itself, there's tons of extra information at the beginning about getting the fit right, like loads of extra information that I did not read, maybe I should have done. It tells you to do a gauze or like a muslin, I guess, first, and then to work out what the size should be. I mean, that was never going to happen. That was very optimistic of them. There's a lot of extra stuff that you get given, which is nice, but I wonder how many people actually take all that in. If you're a beginner, that's quite a lot of information to take in. So I just don't think this is a beginner pattern. I think it's like an advanced beginner pattern, at the very least. But I liked it, and I will make it again, in some other jazzy fabric, probably, hopefully. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know any other patterns that I should look up, and give me a like and a subscribe.